Hello, welcome to Wednesday night's Hotline Live with Record Sport. I'm Daniel Cohen. I'm delighted tonight to be joined by Han Solo and Chewbacca, Keith Jackson, and Scott McDermott. How's it going, guys?
I'm definitely
not bad.
Han Solo, definitely Scott in it, Keith.
I think he's a wee bit hairier than me.
That's true. But you're okay?
Aye, well, I was doing fine until that introduction. Smart ass.
Sorry, couldn't resist it. My mum shot us down last night, so she's, for anyone who didn't see it, I said that Keith was the Robin to my Batman, and she texted me right away saying, "You're definitely Robin," so that was nice.
Emasculated by your own mother. That's lovely.
But anyway, there's only one place for us to start, Scott. These are four words that I never thought I'd be saying in the Hotline Live. Luka Modric to Rangers.
Oh, it's tantalising, isn't it? The Rangers fans have been teased this afternoon. No, look, I don't think it'll be happening. It's a nice thought. What is Luka Modric? I think he's coming up for his 40th birthday, isn't he, in September?
Turns 40, aye.
Aye. Listen, what a signing that would be, even at that age. I mean, Rangers need legs in midfield. I'm not sure that's quite what they'd be looking for.
Hold on a wee second. Let's get realistic about this, right? Because you're actually starting to make this sound as if it's something that actually might be something. There might be a bit of legs in this. Look, think about it. For strictly from a footballing perspective, if Luka Modric signs for Rangers, what are they going to do with Connor Barn? Come on, boys. Can we treat this with the sort of contempt it deserves, please?
Listen, fans are allowed to dream, Jack. We'll stop killing off their dreams and their optimism. Great signing. Brilliant.
Right, so look, let's put a little bit of context to this. A story has sort of emanated from Spain, and it's based around the fact that the Davide Ancelotti has such a good contacts book and network from his time at Real Madrid that the Real Madrid players are now lining up one by one to say, "Can you make my dreams come true and take me to Ibrox with you if you get this job?" That's pretty much the size of it, am I right?
Yep.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And who wrote this?
Our good friend of the show, Guillaume Balaguer, I think wrote the piece for the BBC.
Is he a friend of our show?
Oh, aye, he's a good guy, Guillaume. Good guy. Always answers the phone, Jacko. That's the most important thing. No, look, I think he's been, in all seriousness, I think Guillaume's maybe been clever, knowing this would catch fire. Even the mention of Modric potentially going to Rangers, I think he said in the piece that Davide Ancelotti had asked him about the possibility, and Modric hadn't said no. Clearly hadn't said yes either. But he's put it out there. I think he's kind of...
Did he look at him and say, "Who are you?"
Who are Rangers? I think he's since retracted it, Guillaume, and I actually spoke to him earlier on this afternoon, and well, I think the point he's trying to make is, as you touched on, Jacko, if Rangers do get Ancelotti Junior, they will be opening up how would you describe it? A star-studded contacts book in terms of the players that this guy's worked with, coached, played against, come across, coached against. You think of the clubs that he's been at, even when he was working behind the scenes at clubs when he first started out. I think kind of early days at PSG and Napoli, it wasn't until he got to Bayern that he kind of took on the job of a first team coach. So I think Guillaume's just making the point that if Rangers do pull this off, it could open up a lot of possibilities. If not Modric, then as I say, this guy's got a contacts list that would be the envy probably of most most coaches out there, even though he began his first job. And I do think there's a wee bit in that. I mean, we've been not critical, but been sceptical about the appointment of Ancelotti for a number of reasons. But I don't think you can deny that in terms of contacts and the places he's worked and what experience he's picked up, players he's coached, then he kind of ticks all of those boxes. Could that mean Rangers maybe getting access to players that they might not have access to, or they might not have been able to afford, but the pool of Ancelotti might get them to Glasgow? I think that's a possibility. I don't think that's too outlandish. But
in fairness, Scott, I was saying much the same last night. Wasn't it, Daniel? There are, as Scott said, there are boxes that are ticked in terms of Davide Ancelotti might not have a single managerial game under his belt, but in terms of it being fresh, contemporary, exciting for supporters to be linked with a guy that can open all these doors, there's no doubt that's the package that Rangers are buying into, in the hope that how is it possible that the son of the dad can spend so much time studying his work close up at these clubs, watching one trophy come in after the next, and not have picked up, the expertise and the tactical side and the man management side. That is what is attracting Rangers to the whole idea of Ancelotti. There is a little bit of stardust on it.
Yeah.
But, and that's what I said. If this is the guy and the appointment is made and he comes in and he hits the ground running and the place is flying at the start of next season, then you would have to turn around and say, the American owners have come in, they've gone a different way from, they've ripped up the sort of traditional Scottish approach. They've gone for something that nobody else would have imagined. They've thought outside the box on it, and they would be seen as guys that have, come up with a stroke of genius with this appointment. But the flip side of that is, if it doesn't work out, and this is a guy that's never managed a team before, and never mind set foot or understands the environment in Glasgow and Scottish football, and there's going to be plastic pitches all over the Premier League next year. So if it doesn't work out, it just looks like an absolutely absurd kind of level of risk that would be attached to it. And that's the balance. It'll be one or the other, Scott. That was the point I was making last night. It's difficult to see any grey areas if it is Ancelotti. This is either inspirational, visionary appointment, or it's a complete and utter catastrophe.
The only grey area, Jacko, I think, would be if you said at the beginning, and I don't think this would be accepted probably amongst the Rangers fans, but the only grey area might be if you came out at the start and said, this guy, it's going to take time. This guy literally...
I think the use of the word project will alienate a large chunk of the Rangers supporters right from day one. They don't want any more projects.
No, they want... I think they like the idea of a project in terms of behind the scenes at Auchenhowie, the place being revamped, probably a total reshuffle of staff. I think they like the idea of Rangers setting a different culture, a different style. They want all that behind the scenes to be going on, but at the same time, they want the manager who's out in front to be winning every week and winning that first game of the season, which is going to be away from home. First game of the Premiership could be away to Livy, could be away to Derek McInnes's Hearts. It's going to be a really tough game, as has been proved the last couple of years, because Rangers haven't managed to win any of these first games that have been playing catch-up right away. The punters want to get off to a flyer right away and go and seriously compete for a title. So you're right, if they come out and say, look, this is a long-term thing, Davide is going to take a bit of time, implement his ideas, create this culture, I'm not quite sure how well that would get down.
I would have thought that the whole point in the American takeover is that that's their job. All the stuff you're talking about there, Scott, in the background and the training ground, and revolutionise things. And I think that's exactly what Rangers are going to get from these guys. That's why they're here.
Yep.
So that's not really what the head coach or the manager would be appointed to look after. That's their job, to make this thing function properly as a contemporary modern football club. that's, ready to rival anything across the UK. That's what they will look to implement. So surely the head coach, his job is to win football matches, to make Rangers competitive. And I just don't think after this period that Rangers have come through that the supporters are going to buy into, wow, a project that could take 4 years before it starts bearing any fruit or, producing any trophies. Because let's not forget, Scott, when this season starts, the next season starts, Celtic are going for 5 in a row.
Yep.
Rangers simply can't mess about with 3-4 year projects in that context, in this rivalry. It simply can't happen. It's fanciful to imagine that the Rangers supporters would sit back and say, well, yep, we can wait. They won't wait. They won't wait until... They will not wait until October, December time if the signs are there already that Celtic are off and running and heading towards yet another title.
That's the difference, Jacko, when Steven Gerrard came in 2018. I think it was very rare, but expectation levels at Rangers and amongst the support was actually pretty low. Mm-hmm. At that point, because of where they'd been and the struggles they'd had, before that, Murty and Kashinya and people. I mean, it was so bad that Gerrard actually had a bit of time.
All he had to do was show progress being made.
You're right. And he showed that pretty much right away, especially in Europe. He said one of his main aims getting back in the European group stage, which he did pretty quickly. And I think fans did give him a bit of time. You remember he didn't he win a trophy for the first 2 years. No many Old Firm managers get that. I'm sure we did a piece about that at the time. There was so few Old Firm managers that got to their third season without winning a trophy. But times were different, and obviously Rangers get the reward for that in the third year. Getting the title, stopping 10 in a row. It's a completely different ballgame now to when Gerrard came in first time around. And this would apply specifically, obviously, if Gerrard came back, which has obviously been spoke about. He'd be coming back as a totally different guy, totally different manager. And Rangers, in terms of the expectation level, would be totally different because the guy who comes in now, as Jacko says, has to hit the ground running immediately, has to challenge for a title, and has to win a trophy this season before you've even spoken about progress in Europe. I mean, that's non-negotiable. So expectation levels are sky high. The takeover will take that up a notch again. So it's totally different. There's no... I don't think you get 2 or 3 years that Gerrard got to go and win a trophy. This new guy, if it is Ancelotti, has to start like a steam train. Or at the very least, I suppose if you go back to Postecoglou, Postecoglou struggled. I think it was 6 games in the league. They were behind. But my
Lost
God,
his first 3.
Aye, did the motor after that.
3 of the first 6.
So I think it was 3 of the first 6 he lost.
Aye. So what else did Graham say about why it should be Ancelotti for Rangers, Scott? What was the argument he was making?
His argument is that he's already a top coach in terms of coaching players. He's adamant that the players at Real Madrid, and we know how big those names are. He's adamant they genuinely believe that without Davide Ancelotti, Carlo wouldn't have won the trophies that he has at Real Madrid.
Really? Which is a big call.
Which is a big endorsement. So no, he genuinely believes that this is the right time for him. I don't know how close Guillem is to Ancelotti himself, but he's obviously well connected in Spain and Spanish football. And he thinks genuinely it'd be a really good appointment for Rangers, so much so that there are 2 or 3 other clubs sniffing around, and if Rangers don't move fast on it, then they might regret it, which is what we've spoken about on here the last couple of times I've been on, just in terms of the time scale. It does feel as if Rangers need to get moving on this.
We've got plenty of comments coming in. If you want to get involved in the conversation, please do so. Marzuno says, Gerrard was fresh off being one of the greatest midfielders of all time. That buys you some credit. Scott says that COVID saved his job. Andy says, the 49ers want success immediately. They're there to bring Champions League football back to Rangers. That kind of backs up what you were saying, Keith, about the fans won't want to wait. Roger says, are these three getting paid for this nonsense? Not enough, Roger. Gaza says, if this guy's name wasn't Ancelotti, there's no way he would even be looked at. It's mental going for a guy who's never managed a single game. And see, on that, guys, see, the more we talk about it, you said that there as well, Keith, he's never been a manager. Look, the more we talk about it, just personally, how could you even consider giving this Rangers job at this time to a guy that's never managed before?
I can only imagine what I said previously, that the upside is so good and could be so productive for Rangers that there might be a feeling this is worth the gamble. Again, I come back to Andrew Kavanagh, his business risk assessment, he's in health insurance. This is what he's made his profession. And that's why I find this guy should be absolutely risk adverse, given his business background. And yet this seems like the biggest gamble imaginable. But maybe not. Maybe they've looked into it. Maybe they've got they're using data. I don't know. I don't know how you can use data for a guy that's never managed a team before. But maybe they're saying the risk element, what we consider to be huge, maybe they don't. Maybe they've made their assessment and they think, no, this is the right way to go. And it is, as I said, I come back to it. It's imaginative. It's out the box. It's something that nobody else here would have come up with. But I do have this sort of, logical side which says, do you know what? In all walks of life, whether it's football, whether it's journalism, whatever it is, if you've come up with an idea that nobody else has ever come up with, then you've either struck lucky and come up with a moment of inspirational genius, or you've come up with a really bad idea. Because nobody else has thought about it. So, and it's their reputations that are going on the chopping block here, in terms of it's the Rangers fans who will judge, and they'll not be slow to judge. And this is where they'll be making a mistake, the incoming owners, if they think they're going to be afforded this time to settle in. And every single decision they make will be scrutinised to the nth degree, and they can't make a bigger decision right now than who's going to front it up as manager or head coach next season. And if they're seen to have taken an unnecessarily big risk on someone who then it transpires wasn't cut out for it, they're going to have to cop the flak for that. And if they're not aware of what that response is going to look and sound like, then they're not actually doing due diligence on the real issues. They can do due diligence on business, they can crush all the numbers, but in terms of their relationship with their core support, given what these Rangers supporters have been through over the last wee while, and as Scott said, there's a fire being lit under them a little bit here, because they're expecting, this is it. This is the life-changing moment. This is the moment that Rangers change and they get back to being the dominant force. And if it falls flat at the first hurdle at the start of next season, there'll be a lot of disappointed people out there, and there will be a backlash. That's
the key point, Daniel. You said it there in your question, appointing them at this particular time. If Rangers were sitting here now on 2 in a row or 3 in a row and the top dogs in Scotland, but maybe their manager had left, probably would look at the Ancelotti appointment differently and say, you know what, as Keith says, it's totally different, it's out the box, it feels fresh. All right, it's a bit of a gamble, but listen, no, we're the champions, we've got Champions League money coming in, no, we want to go in a different direction. There'll be a totally different feel about it. The point is, as you say, it's where Rangers are currently. I mean, Celtic are already on 4 in a row. What is it? 13 at the last 14 titles. They've got cash reserves in the bank, upwards of £80 million, probably with more to come. Champions League money. I know the takeover at Rangers might help Rangers in some way, kind of bridge that gap. But in terms of where Rangers are as a club at the moment, to make this type of appointment, where it is so high risk and such a big gamble, you do worry that it's not the right time for it. And someone with more experience, even when we talk about Postecoglou, I remember the reaction when Ange was getting announced a couple of days before, when we'd heard for Celtic that it was going to be him. And I mean, universal disdain about this guy coming in, because he was seen as so inexperienced and that he had never managed in Scottish football and he didn't know the game. He'd never managed in Europe before. But you look at Angie's CV. I mean, he'd managed hundreds of games by that point. He'd won things in different countries. He'd managed a national team, took them to a World Cup. Totally different, and yet his appointment was totally decried. You think of Ancelotti's lack of experience as a manager, and it is, as Jack will say, it's a massive. If it's going to be him, it's a massive, massive gamble.
A couple more comments before we move on from Rangers, guys, because there's so many coming in, and thanks for sending them in. Darren says, Keith, Rangers fan, each day passes are getting angry with not a manager in place. Pre-season starts in like 6 weeks. Madness. I think it's actually about 4 weeks. Jerry makes the point saying pressure's building on these boys before they even get in the door.
Yeah.
Gaza says,
it's looking like world.
Gaza says, it looks like it's going to be an experiment at the cost of Rangers. Feeder club for Leeds vibes. And I think that brings us up to date, really. I mean, if you want to get involved in the conversation, please do so in the comments section below. Just to finish off on it, Andrew says he could be a masterstroke of an appointment or a disaster. Never been a manager in his own right and starting in Glasgow. His experience with his dad and knowledge gained could drive Rangers forward. Honestly, who knows?
Yeah, and that's it. That is the last two words there are the key bit. Who knows? Who knows? And that's why I think it's an incredibly high risk factor attached to it. And the other one there is it's actually a very good point. The boy talking about Critchley at Hearts. And that was Jamestown, and it was the bright new future, and the computer's pointing us in this direction. And ultimately, the common sense appointment was right in front of their face. The Critchley thing, they took a gamble on that. It blew up. And a few months later, they've decided, well, do you know what? The Derek McInnes thing, that was the right way to go. And I think it'll be proven that will be the case over the next wee while. And it's really interesting. Hearts are already tooling up for next season. Signings are being made. They've got a manager that knows this league inside and out. I think Hearts are looking at this going, we've got a real chance to get into the argument here, to get in between, to disrupt the Celtic and Rangers sort of top two at the top. I genuinely believe that's the target for Hearts now. And that's fascinating. But what did Hearts have to do? They took that risk, perhaps thinking that they knew a little bit better than everyone else. They made that decision, and it's backfired on them. And they've had to rein in their ego a little bit and go and make the appointment that was the glaring obvious in the first place. And you wonder if something like that. I've said it a couple of times now, Daniel. You wonder at Rangers, and I do think that the people that are coming in will sort this football club. I absolutely agree that it needed regime change, and I was saying so months and months ago, even before we broke the story about the 49ers and the interest with Andrew Kavanagh. I've been saying Rangers are crying out for regime change. I believe that the people who are coming in the door are exactly the regime change that Rangers need. But I do wonder if a little bit like Hearts, things will need to get worse before they get better.
The other thing is that we've not even touched on there. We're talking about how big a gamble Ancelotti is. For any manager to come in at Rangers just now and be a success, they have to be backed to the hilt financially with new players and better players, because this squad currently is nowhere near good enough to go and challenge Celtic and go and win a title. So we're talking about the manager coming in and how big a risk it is. It doesn't matter. It could be any manager coming in. They're going to need serious money to spend. So to give Ancelotti a chance, even if it is going to be high risk, to give this guy a chance of success, they're going to need to back him at the hilt. And that brings us back to the time factor. If they get enough time to go and do that properly, if it is going to be him, whenever he's appointed, say it's next week, as you say, Daniel, he's basically 3.5 weeks before pre-season to sort that squad out, decide who he wants to keep, who he wants to go, players he wants to bring in. Before you know it, you've got games, and then in the July 21st, you've got the Champions League qualifier. Such a tight turnaround. But I go back to it, for any guy getting in there, they're going to need serious funds to go and improve that squad, because it's not good enough.
Time's getting away from us, guys. Paul in the comment section says, Celtic update, guys. Should we do that, Keith? Have a little Celtic update?
Yeah.
What were you laughing at there?
No, nothing. Was that a comment from Mizuno there saying they're the 49ers?
The asteroids that could kill, that takes out the dinosaurs.
Well, that's Hotline Live in trouble. Me and Scotty are getting wiped out. And the rest of the regular contributors.
Paul is asking about a Celtic update. Let's talk about Celtic. A couple of interesting stories overnight that would suggest that perhaps Celtic's summer spending is about to get underway. Keita Kosugi is one name that's been linked with Celtic. He's a Japanese left back playing with Djurgårdens, and he's made some headlines. Apparently, they played very well against Chelsea in the Conference League. And the other one was Veljko Milivojevic. Easy for me to say.
Say that again, man.
He's a 17-year-old centre back.
Milivojevic.
Aye, there you go. Aye, that's what I said. Celtic, according to reports in Serbia, have bid €9 million for him and seen it rejected. And this is for a player that's been linked with Everton. As I say, he's only 17, so that's a bold bit of money for a 17-year-old centre half, Keith.
I must admit that you've caught me off guard with that. I hadn't seen those reports. My first initial reaction, without being able to make some calls and check it out, is that's a hell of a lot of money for a 17-year-old. But even if it was a 17-year-old centre forward or a 17-year-old winger, an attacking player, for a 17-year-old centre half, and bear in mind the kind of common logic dictates that a centre half isn't really reaching his prime until late into his 20s. That would seem like a massive amount of cash, a massive investment. And I would also counter that, not counter it, but add to that by saying you don't get into bidding wars against clubs from the English Premier League.
Aye.
If there's clubs for the English Premier League that are in and around a player, you're not going to win it. Don't bother.
No. The other step. Sorry, go on, Keith. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Because the clubs in the English Premier League can afford to spend £9 million, £10 million on a player who then goes into their youth system and who then gets loaned out to championship clubs or whatever to develop and deliver on his potential over the course of 2 or 3 years, and then they can put him in. Celtic aren't in a financial position, one, to compete with Premier League clubs for players, and two, if they do spend that amount of money, you've seen the kind of pressure that's been on the likes of your Arnie Engels and your Adamidas, because they come with this price tag attached that people expect them to be world beaters in season one. So if that's the sort of pressure that's on these guys that Brendan Rodgers considers to be ready, oven-ready first-team players, there's no logic attached to that as far as I can see. Might be proved to be completely wrong, but that would be my first impression.
Paul Price is also written in saying Celtic cannot dither over the cost of Lennon Miller this summer. Pay up and do not do another John McGinn. The boys to be a class act, splash the cash, show intent. I mean, Celtic have got the money.
It's a good shout, Daniel. I wouldn't disagree with that. I think Lennon Miller's a top talent and made for Celtic, to be honest. I was convinced there was a game, was it last season? There was a game at Firth Park where Lennon Miller scored, or he hit the bar with a free kick. And
he hit the bar, aye, that's right.
He had a brilliant wee turn past Callum McGregor, I think, to set up a goal.
That's right.
And I remember listening to Brendan Rodgers post-match.
Well, Brendan Rodgers walked out onto the pitch and had a special word for him, didn't he, in the centre circle after that game?
And he mentioned him in his post-match tackle, which is quite unusual for a manager to talk about opposition players, obviously. But I came away from that thinking he definitely fancies him, and if he fancies him, he'll want him in the summer. And you just think about, Callum McGregor Callum McGregor's, I think, still got another 2 or 3 years at top level in him. Doesn't look as if he's waning at all, especially since he's quit the international scene. But he's getting into his 30s. You look at Lennon Miller, the age of him. I'm not saying that they're similar type players or that they'd even play in the exact same position. Lennon Miller can play as a sitting midfielder, but they're different. But I just think in terms of that Scottish identity, there's a boy there who could be a ready-made replacement for Callum McGregor. I mean, listen, he could probably get into the Celtic team just now and play. But I'd be really surprised if Celtic let Lennon Miller slip through their fingers. I mean, I'm not sure about the fees. Not sure what Motherwell exactly are looking for him. Or
I
what
think
the fees
5 million, Scott. I think £5 million will get you Lennon Miller
Aye.
out of Motherwell. And I think that would be a real smart bit of business. And I think that Brendan Rodgers is looking at Lennon Miller and just rubbing his hands at the thought, could you imagine I get to work with this boy? Could you imagine the levels that I could take someone with that raw, natural ability, what he could develop into under, going to Lennoxtown every day and working with Brendan Rodgers? I think it makes complete and utter sense. And I think £5 million is a good number for Motherwell. I think that, that's why, I've been told for a consistent period, a bid of around that amount is likely to be successful. And then you go to Celtic, and then you're given that same platform that's been afforded to the likes of Matt O'Reilly and all the others that have gone to Celtic, progressed and moved on for fortunes. I think that, and Lennon Miller, I think if you look at it, I was down at Fir Park speaking to him a couple of weeks ago, Scott, after being given the Football Writers Young Player of the Year award, or shortly, in fact, a couple of days before the ceremony, actually. And I said to him, look, how would you feel? Because you must be looking now at guys like Billy Gilmore, Scott McTominay, Lewis Ferguson, all these boys that are trailblazers now, young Scottish talents that are going abroad and learning their trade. And Max Johnson, another one that was at Motherwell. And he didn't seem to me to be against the idea. I think he was quite open to it. But in his next breath, he's talking about, when he finishes training at Motherwell, he goes back to the family home, he's outdoors, he's out the back garden having a kickabout with his wee brother, who's, I think, in the under-12s, or whatever it is at Motherwell just now. And you just think, I wonder, he's so tight to his family. Is the idea of Lennon Miller moving abroad at some point in the future conceivable? Absolutely it is. He looks as if he's, made to play, at whatever level he wants to play in, whatever league he wants to play in. But you wonder at this age, 18, could you imagine what 2-3 years under Brendan Rodgers would do for him? And even then, after that, he's still only 21, 22.
Yeah.
And with the world at his feet. So, for me, for all parties, for Motherwell, the number's right. For Celtic, it's a great bit of business because of the potential for growth. And for Lennon Miller, the next stage in his development, I can't think of a better place.
I think that's the key thing is just what he wants, Daniel. I've interviewed Lennon Miller a few times, but I don't know what his real ambition is. It to go to a big club like Celtic at this stage, or as Jacko touched on, does he quite fancy doing a Lewis Ferguson? And I mean, look how that's worked out for him.
But Lewis was a wee bit older on when he made that move. It's a big thing for such a young kid, Scott, to say, right, you know what, I'm going to leave the family behind, especially when they're just as tight as the Millers appear to be.
Yeah. And I know people often say these boys, they're better going abroad and different culture, experience, league, and all that. And there's truth in that. But you can't turn your nose up at going to Celtic and working with Brendan Rodgers. I mean, as Jacko says, you couldn't get a better guy as a young player. No way. No, the evidence to back him up in terms of developing players and nurturing them and improving them and getting players big moves, whether it's the English Premier League or abroad. So if bids are in there, Lennon Miller might have that. Might have to weigh all that up. But I just think purely from Celtic's point of view, the guy touched on John McGinn there. I know it's different circumstances, but there is a bit of similarity to that. I just don't think they would want to look back in a couple of years' time or a few years' time and see Lennon Miller in the Premier League when his value ends 10,
he's untouchable,
20 million, and think we could have had this boy for. He's only got a year left in his deal. Would it even take 5 million? To get Motherwell to sell? I suppose it depends what other bids are there, but they could even get him for less than that. I think it would be a great move for Celtic to try and get him tied up.
The comments are coming in. This one, Jerry says, I heard Rodgers made inquiries to Chelsea. He wants to know how much is Udogie in the window. Now, that would be brilliant, Jerry, if
If we
Udogie
said
played for
so.
Chelsea. He plays for Spurs. The other Celtic news that we should mention, they've made their pre-season plans known. A couple of glamour friendlies, Como against Como in Como and Ajax. Of course, they've had a couple of cracking contests with Ajax over the years. Como, you must have been at Como, Keith, at some point.
Do you know, it's one of the places that's on my list that I've not been to.
I was there a few months ago.
I've been close to Como,
Aye.
but not there.
Aye.
And yes, it is someplace that I fully intend to go to.
Aye, lovely part of the world.
I can't believe, Daniel. I might be covering Rangers in their pre-season, and with the takeover and all that, you're dreaming about maybe San Francisco or Chicago or New York or something like that. Celtic are going to Portugal, Lake Como, and Dublin, and Rangers are getting a week in Button at St George's Park. So that's my reward. That's my reward. Covering Rangers for the season.
We'll need to do a hotline live from Button. That'll be aye.
That'd be great.
Mark saying it's a tournament. It is a tournament in Como. Aye, lovely part of the world. The only other thing that we need to touch on before we wrap up, guys, is the Premier Sports Cup. The draw for the group stage was made today. For anyone that hasn't seen it, I think we can look at the whole draw. There it is. Obviously, the big teams aren't in it now, but a few fixtures there, Keith, that whet your appetite.
Again, blindsided. Instantly, my eyes are drawn towards. I think that could be interesting if Scott Brown remains at Ayr United. I think that's a group that he would think Group D is certainly achievable for him, and he'll fancy going in against St Mirren if he's still there. Kilmarnock and Livingston, El Plastico, that's interesting. In Group H, what were you saying?
Hearts confirming Neil Lennon potentially
versus Derek McInnes.
That would be good. Also, East Kilbride, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
East Kilbride obviously coming into the SPFL, finally getting promoted, and you can imagine the boys there will be looking at that group and just thinking, "Oh, I know that they were in it. They were in it last year, but now they're an SPFL club. They'll be looking at that group. Games against St Johnstone, Wraith Rovers, and all that. I mean, that's brilliant for these boys as they try and get up the leagues now. Obviously, so it'll be interesting to see how they go on.
Aye, definitely. The ties for that start on the weekend is 12th and 13th of July, which just sounds mad. We've just finished this season. We're already talking about next season.
Break, lads.
I know. Well, on that note, I think it might be time to take a break for tonight, at least, guys, because that brings us to the end of Wednesday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. Thanks, as usual, for all the comments. They've been absolutely brilliant. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can do so tomorrow night. We'll be back to do it all again at 6 p.m. Scott, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Evening, Daniel. Evening, Scott.
Cheers, Jacko.
And thanks for watching at home. Cheers.